Welcome to the Wander Podcast. I'm your host, Gracie Hins. And before we jump into it too much today, if you could remember to give us a review on Spotify or wherever it is that you're listening in today. We're a small podcast, so these go a long way. And if you're new here, we are a podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of creatives and athletes and community builders in the outdoor space. So today I'm chatting with Brooke, and she is a gravel cyclist and content creator. And this episode is so good. We just talk about her journey going from being a competitive rower to finding this new sport that she is able to use as a vessel to just learn more about herself and just continue to challenge herself out of the typical kind of athletic sphere that rowing had for her. I'm so excited. We just talk about so many cool things like nutrition and kind of learning the ebbs and flows of jumping into a new sport. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and I would definitely recommend listening to the whole thing. I think that there's a lot that people can take away from it. So without further ado, here is today's conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. I always introduce all of these and start them out with just the question of who are you and what do you spend your time doing?
Yeah, I'm Brookmyer. I have been thinking about this question because I've listened to a few episodes now. So it's like, what am I gonna say? And I think like the thing that I always put on my resume these days is athlete and creator. I feel like first of all, I'm an athlete. I've been doing elite sport since I was 18 in some form or fashion, and right now it's the bike. And then I've recently also become a creator, which I feel like is a weird title to have. It's kind of a loaded one sometimes, but, I was living in England. I moved there for rowing, which was my big sport before cycling. Yeah, and I had to leave because my visa expired, and then I was like, "Well, what do I do now?" So I started making Instagram videos, and then I become a creator, I suppose.
Whoa.
So,
Wait, how long were you in
yeah.
England for?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Tennessee, and I did that for 5 years. My senior year was, like, COVID, so most of my senior class came back for the rowing team. Not everyone, but
Oh, yeah.
the rowing team, we came back because we had a really, really, really good team, and we kind of all thought we might make the national championships. Senior classes are quite important, so we all came back, and I think all but one, really, and then we did make NCAAs that year, so that was really cool. It was kind of all worth it.
Yeah.
And then I was just not ready to be done with rowing. I sort of had these Olympic ambitions, and I wasn't ready for the national team. I knew that, but I needed something in between. So I got a master's degree at Oxford Brookes University in England and continued rowing there.
Okay.
It's like a pretty elite program in the UK. They have people like most of the GB team is actually Oxford Brookes rowers, so it's
Mhm.
like a pretty good
I feel like
transition
like,
zone.
that tracks in my head, like Oxford and really good rowing team. I can't say I follow rowing very well, but that totally aligns in my head.
Yeah. Well, actually, tricky, Oxford and Oxford Brookes are 2
Okay.
different
Are they
schools.
both in Oxford, though?
They
Okay.
are,
Yeah, I'm thinking more like
but
the town, like the general vibes of Oxford.
yeah, Oxford University, they also have a really good rowing team, like, I'm not discounting them,
Yeah.
but they're 2 different schools, and,
Okay.
they're like there's a rivalry for sure. So,
God, God. Well, and
yeah.
then because you were rowing during the master's program.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay. And then
yeah. I like to say that I went to get a master's in rowing with a side of business.
yeah. No,
That's what I was doing.
that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So then was it after the master's that then the visa expired and you had to come back to the US, or did you have some time on the end of that?
Yeah, so I did my master's, and then in the UK, there's a really cool setup where if you graduate from a UK university, you get a certain number of years based off of the number of years you studied. So I got 2 years of a visa afterwards because I got a 1-year degree, and, so then I could just work. You could do anything except be a professional sports person. So I couldn't, like, row by myself, like, as my career, but I could do anything else. So I just got a normal job. Basically, like, at the end of my season with Brooks, I had really come to the conclusion, like, I think I'm not ever gonna go to the Olympics, and I should probably figure out how to move on. So, I got, like, a normal job. I became a rowing coach. That was, like, kind of the way that I filled that hole originally, was I coached junior girls, which I loved, and I continue to love being a coach. I think actually as a rower, even though I was an athlete, I was probably more in a coaching role at most times than I was ever the super talented athlete. So, that definitely felt good place to be afterwards and just working. But then, I was like, "Oh, I still really like racing." So, that came into play as time went on. Yeah.
Did you get into cycling when you were in the UK?
Yeah, I did. Well, I couldn't drive, so I was commuting by bike. Well, first I was walking everywhere, and that's just, like, unattainable. Like, you can't do that all the time. And then I got this super, super big bike. Like, it was this 6-foot-tall man sold it to me, and I'm 5'5", so it was, like, way too big for me. Seat all the way down. I had to, like, kinda do a running start because otherwise like, I couldn't get on and then start pedaling because otherwise we would just tip over. And, yeah, I kind of just, yeah, went around town on that thing. It was so big. And Oxford, there are a lot of roads that are closed to personal vehicles, so only, like, buses or taxis, and so you really have to either walk or cycle to get around the city center, and, so it's, like, a super great place to learn how to ride your bike actually, because everyone's riding their bike, and
You're
there's
not as
always,
terrified
like
to, like, be hit by a car.
yeah, and there's always so many bikes that cars are, like, really aware of where you are, and there's always a bike lane, and, like, probably the more intense thing is at stoplights, the, like, race for the bikes to get going is more intense than you're, like, watching out for the cars. So, yeah, that's really how I started riding bikes, and then when I was stopped rowing, it was kind of like, "Oh, what do we do on the weekends now that I'm not rowing for 8 hours? Well, maybe, like, let's just go ride our bike for an hour." And let's ride our bike for 2 hours, and then let's do 100K, and that's sort of organically how it grew. Yeah.
That, like, total trickle effect. I'm kind of curious just from, like, a comparing the sports a little bit and, like, looking at the training for rowing
Yeah.
and the training for cycling, like, once again, I know, like, nothing about rowing. Like, I get the very general gist of it, but I'm just curious because 'cause I'm like, is rowing considered an endurance sport? And,
It
like
is.
okay,
Yeah.
that makes total sense, but yeah, I'd, like, love to hear a little bit about, like, kind of the comparison of the 2.
Yeah, it's kind of I always thought it was weird that it was considered an endurance sport because the Olympic distance is only 2 kilometers, which is, like, 6.5 minutes if you're in a fast boat,
Yeah, it's like
and
a
so yeah, it's not
Yeah.
really that long, but I think it's more of an endurance sport because of the, like, physiology of it.
Okay.
You can't really like, to row or, like, sprint is not long enough to make it 2K, but it's a super high effort for 2K. I've never gone into the same places that I've gone into for a 2K row that I do for a 100-mile bike ride. There's not really the same vibe at all. But it is still an endurance and when we were training, I mean, we did, like, a lot of volume, so I feel like more endurance because of the training side than the racing side, but it is definitely an endurance sport, yeah.
No, totally, yeah, that's what I was thinking because 'cause I'm like, the only exposure, like, close exposure that I've had to rowing is I was working out on the Passaic River out on the East Coast, and our
Mhm.
job site just happened to be in a really inconvenient location where all of the, like, New Jersey kids were doing their rowing, like, after school, and
Yeah.
it felt really bad because we're, like, this big workboat, like, trying to do stuff with, like, our anchors out, and these kids are, like, trying to, like, just coming, like, so close next to the anchor lines. I'm like, "You're gonna hit the anchor line and then flip the boat," but they
Yeah.
just been going up and down the river for, like, hours on end where I was like, "Wow, that seems like" I'm like, "That's very endurance-y." But, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, like, if you're running, you're doing long runs and you might still be a sprinter, so it makes sense, I guess, in
Yeah, yeah.
kind of way. But, like, with kind of even, like, training volume, it's like cycling takes so much volume, and so have you found yourself kind of doing the same amount of, like, time that you were putting towards rowing as, like, you are now towards cycling?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, so, like, the NCAA requires like, you can't train for more than 20 hours a week, that's, like, a rule so that student athletes are hypothetically protected from being taken advantage of in that way, like, you still need to be able to study, although there's all sorts of ways that coaches work around that, but don't tell anyone. But yeah, so 20 hours a week, we were pretty much rowing, it was like we're counting down the minutes to 20 hours a week, basically, so and at some point, you know, you run out of, like, time where your body can just handle more and more volume, so 20 hours is kind of a lot of volume, so I'm not currently riding my bike more than 20 hours a week, but I think the difference is that you can row for, like, maximum 2 hours. Obviously, there are people who row for more than that. That's not a hard, fast rule, but we only had, like, 2-hour-long sessions. We would go pretty big distance in that, do a lot of volume, but then you kind of have to take a break before you go to the next, whereas you can ride your bike for hours and hours and hours. There's, like, really no limit there. So I think that's where the big difference is that I could put in an 8-hour-long session on Saturday on the bike that is literally 8 hours, and you stop to go to the bathroom or whatever, but you're not, like, taking a break, whereas if we had a Saturday session, it would be 2.5 hours in the morning, take an hour break, 2.5 hours in the afternoon kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So I'm curious, I wanna hear, like, the whole progression of, like, kind of, like, how cycling has become a part of your life, because you kind of mentioned, like, the commuter aspect of it, and then slowly, like, "Oh, I can spend more time on the bike and more time on the
Mhm.
bike," and then, like, even the choice of, like, signing up for your first race, because I feel like that's something that is really intimidating when you're not somebody that has, like, been in the cycling world, like,
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
you look at it and it's just like, "Oh my gosh, like, what if I crash? How do I, like, stop it?" It's like all of that, like, I'd love
Yeah.
to just kind of hear that whole story.
Yeah, and I think the added element is, like, I had only done school sports, so even though, like, I was doing these elite level, it was through a school, and there's a lot of support provided to you, whereas when I started cycling, it was just, like, me and my boyfriend or my mom going out, and that was the support. So yeah, so I started on a bike that was too big for me to commute around, that's, like, really where that began, and then, like I said, I just how do you spend time when you're not a full-time athlete? I didn't know because I had sort of spent most of my adult life at that point being a full-time athlete, so it's like, "Oh, well, you do other sports, I guess." So got involved in that way, and I like I said, I was coaching as well at the time, so I was filling a lot of time that way and still really loving being in the racing scene, and I think when I was coaching those girls, I was, like, really excited about their goals and yeah, super fulfilled that way, but also like, "Oh gosh, I still have this part of me that I'm not tapping into by coaching." And this, like, real desire to try my hardest physically at something. I don't know what it is in me that wants to do that, but it's a strong thing that just wants to, like, push herself really hard and see how fast I can go, really. Um, so yeah, so we started riding bikes more and, like, the first 100K I did was in England, and it was, like, sunny in the morning, and we, like, set out, and then it just started raining harder and harder as we went along, and had no clue at that point about, like, eating. So, I was not eating food on my 60K or my 100K 60-mile ride, and I remember getting home and being like, "I'm gonna eat so much pasta. I've got so much pasta sitting at home for me." And I hated it, and I was like, "I never really wanna do that again." Because the bonk is so hard when you do something for that long, and I think in rowing, there was, like, a real toughness mentality that was like, if you why would you be eating during this session? Like, be tougher than the bonk in a sense. So, I just had no words for carbs per hour. That just didn't exist for me. Um, and then, yeah, like, my boyfriend is really into cycling, and I think he saw a YouTube video about Steamboat Gravel and knew we were coming back to the US to visit my home and such over the summer and was like, "Let's do this." And so suddenly my whole family is gonna go to Steamboat Gravel, and, that was all of ours first gravel event, and, so did that, I guess, in 2023? Yeah,
Pretty
2023.
gnarly, like, first event.
I mean, it's in retrospect, yeah, it's not casual. I did the red course, so I did that was also 100K, like, give or take. Did it on my commuter bike. Like, I got a new commuter bike by that time. It was one that fit me, but it was still a couple $100 commuter bike and had whatever tires it came with from the store and everything, and I was like, "Wow, I do really, really miss racing." And so then the next summer was like, "Okay, well, like, let's sign up for a few more races," and I was also like, "Maybe I could start working with a coach because I don't really know how to train on the bike at all. I've just been doing more time, but that's not really helping me get faster necessarily, and so just, like, sort of explored what that might look like so that I could race just because I wanted to race, not because I was like, "I think I'm gonna be the best in the world at this, but I just like racing, so let's go for it." And, yeah, so started working with her, then had a lot more races on the schedule last summer, but just things that I was interested in. So, like, I knew about Steamboat Gravel, so I went to their Finland race because that's not that far away from England. It sounds like a big, big jump to come from America there, but I was going from London to Helsinki, and that's like a 2.5, 3 hour flight, so not that big. And that was really cool. And then did a bunch of races in England, like pretty much all of the gravel races that they offer. And then, yeah, from there, I was like, "Oh, actually, I do really wanna give this a bigger try," and then have done a bigger calendar this year, so it's sort of just organically built on itself, and I think, I'm looking to next year, trying to build a bit of a program, trying to get some support from some sponsors and things like that, and so we're like, yeah, it just builds and builds and builds.
Totally. So was 2023 kind of the first racing year?
Yeah, I did 1 race that year.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 2023 was, like, the super entry, and then
Mhm.
2024 was kind of, like, the play around with the year, and then this year has been the, like, "Okay, I, like, kind of have my grip now."
Yeah, like, let's actually get fast and let's figure out how to race, because the other thing, since we were comparing rowing and riding, rowing, you have a lane, you just go as fast as you can from A to B, and sure, there's some strategy involved as how to beat your teammate or your, competition and, like, "Oh, we know that they have a really good sprint, so we need to be ahead of them at that point," whatever, there's, like, all stuff like that involved, but you have a lane and you go as fast as you can. Whereas in cycling, there's so much more complicated things going on in that. If you've never done that before, is really hard too, like, you can't just the person who wins the race is not necessarily just the fastest person to travel from A to B, or the fittest person maybe to travel
Mhm.
from A to B.
No, there's so much strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, wildly complicated and takes time
Yeah.
to navigate and figure it all out. What were some of the highs and lows of that 2024 season for you? And then also kind of like those biggest learning lessons of like, okay, like I actually had no idea this is like how this works in racing.
Yeah. I had some huge ambitions for my 2024 season. I think I just didn't have any context for what anyone was doing at the time. Like, what is a professional cyclist, like, ability level versus my ability level? I had this, like, pretty positive rowing career, so I'm pretty fit, pretty strong, but like I said, I think there's a lot of difference between I'm really strong and I can win a cycling race. So, yeah, I had some like, "Oh, I'm gonna win this race or that race," and then, like, no, I wasn't gonna win that race, and I just set myself up for that failure because I, yeah, just had the wrong expectations, I think. Whereas maybe if I had been a little bit more, like, process goal oriented, or like, "Wow, I really wanna be curious at this race rather than win this race." But I think that was also more of, like, the mentality I had in my rowing career that also probably ultimately led me to end my rowing career, was I had a pretty toxic mentality by the end of it, of comparison and, like, if you don't win, it's not good enough and all these kinds of things. And I, yeah, ended the 2024 season, like, pretty disappointed. and was like, okay, if I want to keep doing this, I really just have to shift my mentality. I am fast enough. I am strong. Like, I can figure this out, but I'm going to just defeat myself, really. So I came into this season with a lot more curiosity. And I think that was the thing that was the shift that needed to happen was like, I can learn something from this race. I don't have to win it to have wins, if that makes sense. And yeah, so it was like that was probably the low, was just the expectations I put on myself for, like, being the best in a season. And that's not normally how it works unless you're, like, a really special, special person.
Mhm. What were some of those like, I mean, I imagine, like, nutrition is probably a learning thing, like,
Mhm.
and just, like, the mental yeah, like, even, like, mentally preparing for, like, a long race, it's like, how do you kind of, like what were kind of some of those things that you found, like, worked for you? Whether that's even, like, listening to the right music while you're, like, racing
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
like that, yeah.
No, that's so funny that you mentioned that because I thought that like, I did Unbound 100 this year. I kind of came into this year and I was like, "I'm gonna get really good at 100 miles." That is like, average, I would say, for a lot of races. They're over and under all of it, but 100 miles, like, if I can get really good at 100 miles, like, I think I can take the next step. So, Unbound 100, I had my, like, Shocks headphones on, the ones that go over your ears.
I just got a pair of those. They're quite nice.
Yeah, yeah. Not sponsored, but could be if they want to. But yeah, I had those on for Unbound, and of course, for the first 50 miles was with groups and stuff like that, so it was not listening to music. But then for the last 50, it was more or less by myself, and so I did was, like, having some troubling times, and then I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna listen to some music," so I had a playlist all, like, set up, so I just pressed play, and then I was like, "Whoa, this is way overstimulating," so actually, I
Cool.
don't listen to any music. It's just, like,
Okay, yeah.
too
It's, like, too
much.
much, yeah. No,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, too much. But, on training rides and stuff, of course, I'm not, like, out there like some crazy person, like, 4 hours of silence, but definitely when racing, I just can't handle it. But, yeah, and then other things like nutrition is huge. I have really combated a few things, which is, like, lack of knowledge. Like I was saying that I barely drank water when I was rowing enough probably, like, during sessions. The other thing about rowing is that you are using your hands. So it's not like when you're cycling, you can just pop something into your mouth. It's totally fine. You can keep going, but, or you can slow down and then therefore your breath is less frequent. And so all of that stuff sort of works together, but you're still moving forward, like coasting is a thing. But if you're rowing, you're not eating. Actually, during 2020, I did, uh, like when we were all home, I was like, how do I stay in shape? I did a marathon row on the stationary rowing machine on the erg. And I was like, well, I do have to eat. That took me like a couple of hours. So my mom was like putting things into my mouth as I was like moving up and down. She's like holding the back of my head and like putting a chew in or whatever. It was like so
Hilarious.
ridiculous. But
Yeah.
that was literally the first time I had ever eaten in a session was when I did the marathon. So yeah, like I guess I'm really driving home the point. I had no context for eating while exercising, and then, like, when I started working with a coach was when the first time that conversation really happened,
Okay, yeah.
and then I started being like, "Oh, well, I also now feel all these complicated things about eating while exercising, like, am I gonna gain weight? Like, I'm not skinny enough?" Like, all of those kinds of really unhelpful things that have been fed to lots of people, but I think especially girls from when they're a young age. And also being in rowing and cycling, they're really power to weight related sports. So those little chirping birds, they come up a lot. And we've had to really figure out how to be like, okay, no, this is really going to be useful for you in the end. Like, this is what a bonk feels like. This is what a well fueled race feels like. You can push all the way to the end. It feels fun. It feels good. You enjoy it and also, you're not gaining weight, and even if you did, your effort was fueled, and that's more important, ultimately. So, yeah, I think with nutrition, that's been a lot of work. It's a work in progress, finding the things to eat even, like, I only ate one product for a long time, and then I was, like, getting really tired of it, so I've had to branch out, figure out what do I like, and that's, like, its whole other thing, and then carb mix, you put in your water bottle, "Oh, I really don't like that one, I like that one," like
Yeah,
and
totally.
it's expensive too.
It
So
is.
you have to
Yeah.
figure out ways to not every ride is gonna be a gel and carb mix ride, you know, like, we just can't afford that. So, like, let's make some Rice Krispie treats or some tater tots or whatever other things. And that's been a lot of, like, asking people what they do, but also, like, looking online and or just being like, "I wonder if we should bring some tater tots," you know? So, yeah, so that's definitely been a big, big learning curve, the nutrition side of things. And then, yeah, like I said, the mentality as well of just figuring out how to be on the ride and not only concerned with the destination.
Mhm. Yeah. How do you like, even with some of those little nutrition thoughts that were kind of like chirping in your ear, I feel like it's interesting because depending on really, if it's like if you're coming from an endurance background, it's like we all kind of like figured this out at one point or another. It's like,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, wow, I went on a run today, didn't eat anything, and then I felt terrible. It's like,
Mhm,
okay, so
mhm.
you kind of get to that point where it's like, wow, like I'm not feeling and I'm not performing the way that I feel like I could be. But it is really hard to, like, kind of come to that realization, especially as a woman, because you just have those little chirping things, like you're saying, in your ear. So were there any kind of, like, moments or even, like, phrases that you feel like kind of kicked you out of that?
Mm. Yeah, I think, like, trying to figure out who I was listening to, I think, like, maybe in my outside of sport life, I've been really trying to figure out how to notice my needs. Maybe that's, like, we're looking at left field here, but I promise we'll come around. But, like, instead of forcing myself sort of to deal with really uncomfortable things, I've been like, "Actually, what could I do for myself to give myself a little bit more comfort in this situation?" Like, yeah, I can go for a coffee before work and give myself a little treat, and I'm not, like, weak now. And so I think similarly, I've been tuning into my own voice and what I feel and need rather than some sort of external voice who's been telling me to be tougher or work harder or all of those things. I think that has eked into the nutrition side of like, what do I know to be true? And I know that this brownie that I'm eating right now is gonna actually make me feel better and not make me gain weight, and also if I gained weight, who cares? Like,
Yeah,
not me, ultimately.
yeah.
That's somebody else's voice also. And then I think beyond listening to my own voice, looking out and listening to the voices that I respect and that I want to be more like, and the women who I respect are eating per hour and are eating just generally. Um, and I like those women. I think they're great, and I would like to be like them, so maybe I should do some of the things that they're doing, including fueling my rides, you know? Um, I feel like there was something that, I saw recently, it was, like, Alana Mar, the rugby player, she was talking about, like, "This doesn't taste as good as skinny feels," like, "No, being strong tastes better," like, all of these other things. And I was like, "Yeah, it's so annoying that that's still a thing, you know, that people are trying to make you feel." So, yeah. But listening to a voice like hers, she's someone I like. You know, let's drown out those other ones.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder too just to be mindful of, like, where it is that you're like, who is it that you're listening to, and, I think
Mhm.
you get, like, sucked into, like, one social media portal kind of thing, and kinda
Portal,
just
yeah.
it's like your feed will just kinda be the same for, like, 3 weeks, and it's like, it doesn't it's so I don't know, it's easy to get, like, stuck in that and, like, yeah, not take a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is 2020 like, what were the ambitions kind of coming into 2025? And then you're saying the broken collarbone.
Yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
did that derail or not derail some of the year?
Yeah, to be honest yeah, anyways, I'll talk about the collarbone. Yeah, so I left the UK in mid-January, so I left my job, I left my home at the time, my boyfriend, everything was sort of thrown up into the air. And as I was leading into that, I was like, well, what is something I could do? Like, this is an opportunity. And so I went to Girona for 3 months just to sort of see what that would be like and get as fit as I could. And then I did a race while I was there. And I was like 5K, I think, to the finish line of day one of 2 days of racing. And came around this corner, like, knew it was a paved corner. I'd pre-ridden it, and it had rained that week, and so a bunch of sediment, like rocks and gravel and stuff, had been thrown onto the road, and I just came in super hot, and then it was not a normal paved corner, and I, like, slid. Basically, did you watch the Tour de France Femmes? You know when Kim LaCourt kind of, like, hopped on her brakes and she, like, slid off the road? I basically did that. I basically was like, "Oh my god, this turn is not what I thought it was gonna be." Hopped on my brakes really hard and slid over. I didn't go over my handlebars like she did, luckily. Maybe not luckily, I don't know. But I slid into the side of the mountain, and so I just, like, hit with my shoulder, got a fracture right where my shoulder and collarbone sort of meet. So it wasn't one of those, like, broken half collarbone right in the center. Anyways, I, like, kind of tried to finish the race, but I was like, "I really don't think I can sort of go up and down and hold onto my handlebars like I need to in a gravel race." So I pulled over. These people were super, super helpful. I used my Spanish to say, "This hurts," and then she was asking me some questions, and I was like, "This hurts." Like, "That's all I got for you, sorry." And so then they sort of took me to the hospital. I did get imaging done, but at the time, they told me I just had, like, a joint strain. And sort of I think part of it was, like, the communication. Maybe I wasn't able to tell them how badly it hurt, and we were all having a nice time laughing about the American trying to fumble through her Spanish, it's, like, not so bad, but they were like, "Wear this for a few days, this sling, and then you'll be fine." And I was like, "Okay, that is what I wanna hear because then I can keep riding my bike." So I was off the bike for, like, 3 days, and then I got back on the bike. And I was seeing a physio, and she was like, I don't think this is a joint strain, like, you still have so much bruising and so much swelling, and, like, this is way too much for something casual." And then I did get an MRI and, like, did a bit more, um, sleuthing to see what was going on, and I had a fracture. It just wasn't one of the fractures that's broken all the way through, so you have to have surgery, which is what a lot of collarbone fractures are. So I actually spent 3 days off the bike, and normally they would have you spend, like, 3 weeks off the bike for something like this. So, it did it derail my season? I missed 1 race, and I didn't miss any training. So I don't know
Perfect. So, like,
if it
best
really
collarbone
derailed
injury that you could
anything.
have had is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it was pretty painful, but I got to ride in Girona, and I didn't have to sit in the gym, so that was pretty nice.
That is good.
That would have been such a bummer if they had been, like, 3 weeks in the gym and I was like, "I came all the way here to ride outside." Um, yeah, so it was pretty okay. Missed 1 race, that was a bummer, but then just hopped back into it. The ambitions were to do as well as possible to set myself up to enter the elite field in 2026. Sort of get lots of good experience racing fast races, racing with the men. As much as I don't love it, it's also helpful to try and figure out how to get on wheels and how to be a little bit more strategic and stuff like that. So worked on that. And then, yeah, put together a race CV and talking to sponsors and doing this whole thing that is pretty tricky because I think on the gravel side, there isn't a pathway really. Whereas, if you went road, it's like, cat up, here you go. And then once you get to this category, you can apply to these teams and stuff like that, which I've been trying to do. I've been trying to cat up on the road just for, again, like that experience level, but that's been really tricky. Trying to get points and do all that stuff has been really hard. But gravel side's been going pretty well. so so I think that goal was achieved or is being achieved. Still got some more races to go.
Well, and so you moved so when the visa expired, you went to Girona for 3 months, and were you for? Because 'cause you're in Colorado now, is that right?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then did you have that planned or, like, what was that life transition? Because I imagine that was, like, not the easiest life transition if you were not, like, wanting to move back from England.
Yeah, so I spent 3 months in Spain mostly because that's how long you can be there as a visitor, and then came back to Colorado. Yeah, intended to come back to the US for the summer at least to race. The gravel racing There is gravel racing in Europe. It's super cool. It's very fun. I'm not digging at that, but the best racing is in the US. So, if I have the opportunity to come here and I moved into my parents' basement, lucky enough that they were willing to have that happen. So, yeah, I have driven to every race. So, we've spent some good Midwestern miles this summer and, just trying to do it as budget friendly as possible, and then yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like, well, what am I doing? Like post gravel season, I'm gonna go back to England for a little bit, maybe go to Spain for a little bit, but I'm a little bit of a wandering woman at the
Yes.
moment.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's just getting all of the things, like, laid in place, which takes time.
Mhm.
Well, and then, like, career-wise, you left the job and then kinda jumped into, like, the social media space, um,
Mhm.
and so, like, what has, like, that those ups and downs look like as well? And, like, what's kind of I mean, I imagine there's not, like, an end all be all goal, but, like, I don't know, like, what would you kind of hope the next 6 months to a year kind of, like, help fall into place?
Yeah. Yeah, so I worked in social media. That was my job in the UK. So I was sitting on a train when I knew I was leaving, it was probably in January, and I was sitting on a train coming back from a conference with my colleague, and we were talking about our ambitions, yeah, what we wanna do, and I was like, "Well, I really have this racing side that I wanna figure out how to do." I was working for a sports league, and so I had all this exposure to professional athletes through that, and I was like, "I have all these things that I think that those athletes can be doing and they're not doing," and we're just, like, kind of talking, and she was like, "Well, I think actually you should be starting an Instagram, and you should be doing that, like, you could. You're that person." I was like, "Really?" Like, I so that sort of sat with me for a little bit, and then, yeah, actually, her and I have had this really great partnership that she and I have been working together since I left that company, just to she's been, like, my sounding board as I go through this and also sort of the person who's, like, keeping me grounded to be like, "No, no, you can like, you're doing great, sweetie," and, like, you really need those sort of cheerleaders when you're trying to plot this path that feels like no one's plotted before. Um, which, of course, I'm not the first person to create content on social media, but it does feel really lonely, I guess, sometimes. Um, so, yeah, I think the goal when we started was to figure out how to tell my story, how to get people interested in that, and support the racing side, and it's really turned into a much different thing, I think. It's become a lot more about my community and my audience than it has about me, I feel, um, which I'm really happy with. I am really excited to be sharing with them ways to get involved in the sport rather than, "Look at me, here's what I'm doing in the sport." And so I have taken on, like, bike mechanic as a
And
as
and I
a
was
title.
totally gonna ask about that because the, like, Not Your Boyfriend's Bike Mechanic whole
Mhm.
series is amazing, first of all, and I, like well, yeah, I wanted to, like, hear the origin of that because I was like I feel like I saw one of those videos a while ago, and then I don't even know if I, like, totally pieced together that it was you, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute."
Yeah, yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah. And, like, totally
Yeah,
like, that community piece of kinda like what you're saying of, like, yeah, that's, like people are super psyched on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was making content that was more like what we've been calling kind of, like, useless content. Not that there's not a use, but it's like the beautiful, "Wow, that looks so fun," and there's an audience for that. There are people who like to watch what I call useless content. But that was not I wasn't attracting that. It's also a super saturated group of creators, I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was sitting down, like, trying to figure out how to differentiate and actually how like, what are my values as a creator, because that's a hat I am putting on. And I think, yeah, it was about women and about getting women onto bikes. What I was creating wasn't inspiring women to get onto bikes. Yeah, so me and my friend, my colleague, we were sort of talking about like, well, she doesn't ride bikes and was visiting me for the weekend and I was telling her all about bikes. She rode a road bike for the first time. We're like going through all of this stuff and she's like, "Well, this is what's getting people on bikes, like not sort of this aesthetic content." So then yeah, that's where the idea was really born. And yeah, we played around with some names and stuff like that, and then Not Your Boyfriends felt true because also at that time I was living away from my boyfriend for the first time, and he was the real cyclist in our relationship at prior to that point, and so he did all my bike mechanics. He likes to do that stuff,
As
and
the
so
boyfriends do, yeah.
as the boyfriends do, and, and then also I met all these women who are good cyclists in Girona, but they had boyfriends also who were good cyclists, and they'd be like, "Oh, I was talking to my boyfriend the other day about how to descend better." And he just said, "Don't touch your brakes." And that's like not a helpful thing for anyone who's trying to descend better. Like, yeah, well, obviously the goal is to not touch your brakes, but like how? Like what does that actually mean? And so yeah, so I was like, "Oh, well, we're not taking the boyfriend's advice here. We got to have our own sort of
Sometimes it also
set of
doesn't
advice."
it doesn't quite translate sometimes from, like, what the men are doing to, like, "Oh, yeah, just do it this,"
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, I'll be like, "Yeah, great, fantastic," and then, like, it just doesn't register, and then,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
but, like, female tells me that, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that makes so much more sense."
Yeah.
I don't know, but, yeah,
Yeah, we're not small men.
no,
We're women. It's a
completely
difference.
different.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's definitely taken on its own, personality, not your boyfriend, if you will, and got way stronger, super positive response. I think pretty much everyone who's joined in on the community has come from that series.
Oh,
So,
interesting,
it's
yeah.
like, "Okay, well, that's what the people want. We're gonna give them what they need." And then the response to that is, like, actual people riding their bike more often, or women I've seen at gravel races or different bike events coming up to me being like, "Oh, I joined this group ride that I never thought I could join because I felt confidence based off of a video that you made. Now I've done the longest ride I've ever done. I was really scared because what if I got a flat? And now I know I can change a flat." Those kinds of things, and that's real.
Oh, that,
Yeah,
oh my gosh. That's the kind of stuff that's like, "Wow, this is why I'm doing it." And, like, you hear these
totally.
things too, and it's just like, yeah, it hits the heart.
It does, it does. And it's, like, way bigger than racing. It's way bigger than, like, some cool aesthetic content that you post on socials. That's, like, real life, and so that's, I guess, kept me motivated as well to keep creating content because it's not the easiest thing to do. And, yeah, and plotting this path of figuring it all out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, and those are good things to hear, and just, like, it is such a digestible form to take in that information as well, like, when you're just scrolling through Instagram, it's like, "Oh, here's, like, a minute of, like, informational stuff," and then it's like, "Oh, cool, I can, like, save that and, like, look back on it."
Yeah.
I think it's definitely, like, a unique way to do it versus even just, like, a YouTube channel where it is, like, more of a commitment.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like you kinda have to be seeking it out a little bit more of like, "Oh, shoot, I just got a flat. Now I have to look up my YouTube video on how to."
How to fix that, yeah.
I've done that before. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, no shade.
still being confused and stressed. Yeah, no, it's an important thing. You were just out at Gravel Worlds, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I was.
I'm curious about the experience of that because I had been talking to Catherine, like, a while ago about, like, all of the involvement with, like, what she was doing and,
Yeah.
like, everything at Gravel Worlds. But, yeah, I'm just curious because, like, I feel like it's a little bit of a random one. Not random,
Gravel worlds.
like, yeah, I'm like, it's, like, random, but it's not random, and then this time of year, there's lots of events that are something worlds, and you're like, "Okay, is
Oh.
it PI? Is it gravel archery? Is it
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nebraska?"
Is it
Uh,
Nebraska? Yeah, yeah.
like, there's just, yeah, I don't know, but, like, I mean, it was such a cool race to be following, and it seemed like there were, like, cool conversations that you were having at that too, so would love to hear a little debrief on how that
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, well, I signed up like, I was an early bird discount member of that race because I saw their coverage last year and how much they were valuing the women's race, and I was like, "Oh, that's something I really wanna support." They live streamed both men's and women's races, they had a separate women's start, all of those things that yeah, they were sort of on the cutting edge of that, and actually, like, Lifetime hadn't been doing all of that yet, and, like, they now have a live stream, and that's really looking great and all of that, but Gravel Bros was actually a pioneer in the
Yeah,
space,
it
maybe
was.
we could call them. And, so, yeah, so I was like, "I wanna support that," and then as I've gotten more and more involved in the gravel cycling world, I've met some people, including Hannah Shell, who is part of the Gravel World's promoting team, and she and I went on a ride, and she was like, "Oh, do you wanna be on this panel? We love what you're doing, with your Instagram." And so, yeah, got onto this panel with Catherine Taylor of Feisty Media, and, yeah, we just talked about creating spaces for women in cycling. It was pretty fun, and then they hosted a women's ride, which was really well attended, which was super great, and I think the other thing that Gravel Worlds has done really well is this 1,000 Women initiative, so finding ways to actually get women involved in their race and valuing, like, maybe it's a problem that there aren't as many women. Why don't they feel safe being here? Why aren't they signing up? And then tackling those challenges. And I think I want to be parts of communities who are doing that, like not races who are just sort of like, well, I guess there's no women here, So, um, yeah, just being part of that environment is really exciting to me. Yeah, the race didn't go to plan for me. I had an infection sort of in the week leading up, so it was, like, not riding my bike very much,
The
and then
August blues
the
right there.
mud yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the
Mm.
August blues, yeah, who knew? But it's real. August was a rough month. But I was still really happy that I got to be a part of it, and, it was, yeah, cool to line up, saw some really friendly faces at the start line, which was helpful, and I didn't even really wanna start, to be honest, like, it was a struggle to get out of the house to get to the start line, and then to see people I knew, and then people who were like, "Yeah, let's go, like, let's race," and we're excited to be there too, was such a world of difference, and I think that's been also I guess to bring it back to the goals of this season, one of the goals of the season was to, like, be part of the community because sort of last year I went to a lot of races by myself and
Mhm.
pretty extroverted girl, love to yap, as we can tell. But it's different when you go by yourself or when you go and you see people or you have teammates. And so I've joined this team called Distance to Empty, and being part of a team of girls again has been so, so fun. I love being on a team. So yeah.
Yeah, what is the team kind of element? Or, like, are you guys traveling as a team, or is it more just kind of like the, like, support and communication and just, like, being like, training in the same spot?
Yeah, so everyone who's on Distance to Empty is based in Colorado, I think except for one woman, she's not, but everyone else is based in Colorado, and it was started by Starla Tedder Green. She is a pro, and she wanted to use her, I guess, support system to bring other women along with her, and I think she's, like, a really, really great example of how to lift other people with you as you go, and so, yeah, she started this team people who wanna ride bikes and have different stories, so not everyone is really searching for the elite field. There are some people who just needed some support to get to the start line, and their goal was to complete 100 miles or whatever it was, and so it's like a real spectrum year to year who is on the team, and this year we've had, like, a really, really great group who is actually pretty competitive, and so it's been really cool to be part of, like, really pushing each other, but Like, I think there were 4 of us that went to Unbound, we all stayed in Airbnb, so there's, like, that support, and also Unbound supported like, I didn't have to pay entry fee because they were like, "We wanna support Distance to Empty," so they support us through entry fees. Same with a few other races this summer, like Poco Fondo, they supported us that way. A really great race, shout out to them if anyone is interested, would recommend. Or like I'm gonna go to the RAD later in September, another one who's a big supporter of the Distance to Empty team. So, yeah, so we've got some support in the local community for races, product support as well that Starla's, sponsors are providing, stuff like that. So sort of this entry level point because cycling is kind of a gatekeepy sport in a lot of ways. Like, how do you know what to buy and things are expensive and all of that kind of stuff. So she's really opening the doors for women to get involved in a super tangible way.
Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and it's just cool to, like, be riding with yeah, to, like, have that support just in everything.
Yeah, yeah, and like when I was rowing, I was on teams of, like, 50 women, and that's, like, such a difference maker when you are having a hard time and you're in the August blues and you're like, "I don't think I can do this 4-hour session today," but you show up because you know that there are gonna be 2 other people or 50 other people when I was rowing there, to push you along is, like, such a big difference, and we've even had rides where we invite other women that aren't on the team, and so it's become this, like, really cool little pocket of support.
Mhm. Yeah, no, totally. I think yeah. And you can just, like, be involved in the community in a different way, and yeah, good stuff. And it's like cycling is individual, but it is also a little bit of a team sport. So, depending on, where you at and who you are. Um,
Yeah.
when at the very beginning of this conversation, you were kinda talking about, like, um it's like you found coaching a little bit, and then you found cycling and, like, diving into cycling kind of is, like, filling this, like, void a little bit, and I feel like
Mhm.
this is something that a lot of us have, especially when it's like, okay, I'm, making a switch, whether it's, like, after a master's degree or, it's just, like, those life transition periods. Oh, are you still there? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
sorry.
yeah. So it's like I feel like it's easy for people to kind of have that, and I think sometimes it's hard to even say like, "Oh, I have this kind of like void." And I mean like that was something really that like I struggled with when I finished when I finished like undergrad and then when I finished my master's degree. It's like, okay, like, it's like you have more free time and these identities are like stripped away a little bit. And like really like wander has kind of been this thing that's like filled the not, like, total void, but, like, it's been that thing that I've just been like, "Oh, wow, like, this is what I'm, like, really excited about." And so I don't know, if you have any advice for people that, like, are just kind of in that
Yeah.
that space or just, like, a transition period of, like, how do you almost, like, let yourself lean into what it is that you are most excited about?
Gosh, I am the queen of transition at the moment, so yeah, I think part of the process I talked about earlier about listening to my own voice, that is not really something I practiced for a long time. I think there are some people out there who have such a strong internal voice, and they're just being led around, and awesome for them. That just has not been my experience. I'm super susceptible to listening to outside voices and have had to really tune in to be like, well, what do I want to do here? And what do I feel best at? And also, how do I take it one day at a time rather than being like, my 1 year plan and my 3 year plan and my 5 year plan, and I'm going to stick to it no matter what happens. I, for the, yeah, first time have really not had a super strict, like, this is where I go from here. Like, when I knew my visa was expiring, I was like, okay, I think I don't want to sit where I am right now. I don't want this to continue in the way it is. I want something to change. I know the next step is to go to Girona, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do that. And then I'm gonna figure out what the next step is. And so it's super uncomfortable. I'm not saying that it's an easy route to take, or is it an easy route? Or is it the right route, I guess, for everyone? But I think there's been something super magical about just looking inside me and, like, really being like, what brings me joy? And then the feedback from that has been super positive. What I've come into myself and then brought out into the world has, like, probably been a more truer version of myself, and I've gotten great external feedback. All of that external voicing that I always wanted, but I was probably too focused on to, like, bring something authentic, and then I was, like, never getting enough external validation and never getting the external validation I wanted or feeling seen, actually required me to, like, maybe turn away from those voices and turn internal, and then I've feel seen, and now I feel like I've got that external validation I've wanted, and all of those things have sort of come as I've listened to myself. So I think yeah, I think in those transition periods and in those, like, feelings of missing that yeah, finding the little pieces inside of you that do sparkle and that do bring joy, and then, like, doing that a little bit more and, like, trying that hat on for a month, and if that hat doesn't really fit, okay, like, let's just find
Change
the
it.
next one. Yeah, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be rigid,
Yeah.
and that, for me, has been such a big change. Like, yeah, if we don't wanna do this anymore, we don't have to, and sometimes you don't feel like that's true, but really you're the master of your ship.
Yeah. That's a good reminder right there. If you were to give yourself any advice, um, like 5 years ago, like if you could travel back like 5 years, which I think is slightly hard because that is basically COVID at this point, which I always forget because 'cause I'm like, "Oh gosh, that was already 5 years ago." But yeah, if you did have any advice to give yourself like 5 years ago, what would it be?
Yeah, gosh, 5 years ago, yeah, it was COVID, was yeah, I think the thing that's helped me so much is embracing the unknown. I think probably at COVID time, I was like, "This is my career, this is what I need to do next, this is" and finding a lot of peace in that, or maybe I thought I was finding peace in that, and actually, I have no idea what anything is gonna look like in 5 years, and maybe that's because I couldn't have even dreamt of it. Maybe it's because it sucks a little bit, like, maybe there's some things that I don't want in that, but who knows where I'm gonna be in another 5 years and what, like how lucky is that, kind of, that we get to open the book every day and find out what happens rather than being really scared of that, of being like, "But I have to achieve this goal and I have to do this thing." It's like, wow, I get to be on the journey, and I think yeah, like, rather than it being a scary uncertainty, it being, like, a really great opportunity to be curious about what happens next, and I think, like, taking on the bike has been, like, the biggest catalyst of that in my life, of, like, being curious and the adventure that it's given me, because now I can travel 100 miles and see things, and I'm moving at a much different rate than I would be in the car, or even able to reach places that I couldn't in the car, and that's pretty cool, and who knows if I'll be racing next summer, maybe something happens and I'm not there, but I still can carry wonder and curiosity into whatever it is I'm doing in a year. That's me, and it's not what I'm doing, it's who I am, I guess.
The bike is a catalyst and a vessel for, like, getting to figure
Mhm.
so much more in life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think someone I was in, like, this program, and it was, like, a lot of athletes who were trying to figure out how to do the next steps. It was when I probably 5 years ago, actually, and, the, like, leader of this group was talking to this guy, he played basketball and was like, "Who are you?" And the guy was like, "Well, I'm a basketball player." And then the leader was, like, kinda, like, trying to get a little bit more out of him, and I remember ultimately the guy was just defining himself as basketball player, and even if he kinda went in different ways, ultimately it was just that he plays basketball, and the leader guy was like, "Basketball is the vehicle for you to achieve something here. What's that?" Like, "I don't care about basketball. It could be anything, actually. What are you gonna achieve with that thing?" And from there, maybe that is part of how I've gotten to this place, is that 5-year ago conversation. But it's like, yeah, rowing is a vehicle. Now that vehicle is run out of gas. Now coaching is a vehicle. Okay, that maybe had half a tank for me or whatever, and so now I need to add something else to it, whatever. And so, yeah, remembering that these things that we do are just things that we do. They aren't who we are.
Mhm. Amazing.
Thanks.
Where can people find you online, and what should people be looking out for in the near future?
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram, that's, like, the best place. Trying to bring up the TikTok again, but for some reason, TikTok scares me. I don't know. Uh, well, yeah, I don't know what to do with it sometimes, but I'm working on bringing the content back there, so if you're a TikTok girly, I promise I'll be with you soon. Um, but Instagram is definitely where I'm most active. Send me a DM, I'm always open to it. And then, yeah, working on a YouTube, so that will be looking out in the future, trying to make some more relatable content on YouTube. And yeah, we're going to Gravel Nationals in September and the Rad. So those will be some really exciting events. And then shutting down for the season, getting a little bit of recovery and rest before we ramp up for 2026. Yeah.
Yep, when the season starts back in February.
Yeah, you better be ready. Yeah.
February to October season. Thanks so much for listening in today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have